All right, welcome. We're going to talk about free will, determinism right now. All right, here's a bunch of movies that deal with themes that we are going to touch upon during this little discussion. You guys are too young, but Lost started 2004. J.J. Abrams, who did Episode 7, Star Wars, he was one of the guys behind that. I, Robot, Isaac Asimov. You don't need to see that. All right. Avengers Infinity War came out last week. Doctor Strange, he can look into the future. So, yeah. All right, let's jump in. All right, metaphysical anthropology. We're talking about what are humans? What are humans' powers? Are humans different than other parts of nature? So when you look outside, the volcano outside your bedroom window, you ask yourself, wow, that volcano and the parts of the volcano, they don't have any choices. They aren't free. So if that volcano erupts and lava comes down on my house and melts the home and me, I can't really blame that volcano for doing that. It's just nature. It's just operating according to the laws of chemistry and physics. Well, I should have put in here a little clip. It was from a Family Guy episode where Mayor West goes down and stabs the ocean because he was angry at the ocean because the ocean drowned Peter Griffin. And so that brings us to our question. We blame human beings. So I'm in a library here in Cincinnati, Ohio, Westchester, the district of John Boehner, former Speaker of the House. He actually is responsible for this getting done. So thank you, John. Anyway, thank you, John, for getting this library done. I am assuming John had some choices. He could lobby for this library or not, that type of thing. That's different than I'm looking at a river and saying, why are you cold? I want to swim in you. Get angry at the river for being cold. No, rivers are just cold. All right. So think about it. How much of society depends upon this belief that children and adults have real choices that are not determined by nature or by God. So yeah, we praise and blame people for actions. If they're cut us off on the highway, we blame them. But we don't get angry at a storm. Well, we might get angry at Hurricane Harvey, but I mean, we don't think it has a free choice to destroy our home or not. So let's talk about these questions right here. All right, anybody a fan of Rush, Geddy Lee? These guys believe in free will. So I think about this episode every time I hear it. I put that picture up for Victims of France 2015. When I was there in 2012. Yeah. This is not a PG cover. I don't know how they got away with that back in the early 80s. All right. So Tom Morris wrote this book, Philosophy for Dummies, in the 1990s. He was a professor of philosophy at Notre Dame University, but then he left after he wrote when Aristotle, if Aristotle ran General Motors. So he made a lot of money on the circuit, giving speeches to businesses and whatnot. So we're going to cover all these views, but if you want to, wait a minute. So if you want to get on there and do that, we can do that. I forgot, we've got a laser pointer. All right, excuse me. This is one in the Philippines in 2010. That's who's talking to you right there. All right. So some issues surrounding the existence or non-existence of human freedom. We'll talk about morality and free will briefly, theology and free will, and fatalism. We already talked about this morality. You know, in the Family Guy episode when Mayor West is stabbing the ocean out of anger to punish it, where most of us think that's incoherent. But if there was a guy that drowned Peter Griffin and Mayor West went and tried to stab him to punish him for killing Peter Griffin, then we might say, that makes more sense because humans have powers other parts of nature do not have. That's weird. So Tom Morris explains, a belief in free will, quote, is presupposed by all of traditional morality. Carl Jung said, quote, without freedom there could be no morality. So this is the common sense belief. Humans are different from other parts of nature. Therefore, we can blame humans when we don't blame parts of nature. All of us think that we are free to choose what we will think about, what we will do in our everyday choices, or our lives. So think about it and talk about this in the discussion board if you want. Praise or blame for our actions presupposes human freedom, doesn't it? So we only praise or blame things or people when they have some kind of control or freedom to choose a particular decision. Ask yourself if that is true. A way to show this is that we give grace to people who make decisions under duress. So if Thor holds Mjolnir or his new axe over my head and says, hey, give me an A on my test or I'm going to bash your brains out, and I give him an A. Most of us would say, okay, in some sense I did have a choice to say, no, I'm not going to do that, and then to get killed, or that really wasn't a choice. I wasn't as free because I was pressured. Though some people might say you still had a degree of freedom. I just watched a horrible documentary yesterday on the Einsatzgruppen, the Hitler's SS in the East that just killed, tens of thousands of Jews and communists and gypsies and homosexuals, gay people. And they were talking about this one woman. She was Ukrainian. She actually saw how guards went up to these young women and said, you have to undress. So they wanted the women to undress before they go into the ravine and get shot. And they said no. So they went to their deaths, even with a gun in their face, and they died. They're like, we're not going to shame ourselves, and so on. All right, you get the point. So we also, last point here, we also do not blame people for things which they have no control. If you guys saw The Manchurian Candidate, either one of them, I like that Tony Stark mentions it in these latest movies. But Liev Schreiber, Denzel Washington, they were under the influence of third parties. So a mad scientist puts an electrode in your brain and controls you. So Manchurian candidates, we don't blame them as much. All right? So thus, they were not held responsible for the murders they committed. All right, Tom Morris, page 126, if you have that text. And I think it's free online at this point, since they made another author rewrite the book. Quote, attitudes of regret and pride also presuppose free will. A feeling of regret is tied to the belief that I could have acted differently. Likewise, a sense of pride wells up from the realization that I could have settled for less, but didn't. So think about your life. Think about, wow, you know what? Man, I did it. Wow, I failed in this. Wow, I succeeded in this. And so you take pride. I just watched Rafa win Barcelona, the 500 event, with my aunt on Sunday in Louisville. And Rafa can take pride, I think. And in how he played, and with a little bit of luck, staying healthy, boom, you can take pride, and his training paid off. All right, so we know, second bullet point, we all naturally believe that we are free. We naturally think that the future is open to our will in large ways as well as in small things. And this is a crucial belief for most worldviews. End quote. So look around, think about your worldview, or worldview is like a religion or the summation of all your most important philosophical beliefs about where humans came from, what humans are, what is the good life, what is a good person, how do we become a good person, what should government be like, and so on. All right, to continue with Tom Morris quote, our belief in free will is important and it's powerful. We all deep down want to believe that we can make a difference in this life, that we can overcome obstacles and creatively make our mark in the world. And we can't believe in either creativity or responsibility unless we presuppose freedom. So you think about it. A lot of people don't like Donald Trump, and we blame him for being the way he is, or choices that he makes, and so on. Or other people blamed Obama. What happened? Any political leader. But if these people are just controlled by DNA and environment, and they never had a choice in their lives, how can we actually blame them? So getting upset or blaming a president is like being upset at the lava flow that's about to destroy your house, or being upset at the rain that's coming. It's just going to rain. People are like rain. All right. I don't know if this will work. Let me try to play it. Get rid of this. Anyway, if you saw Waking Life, there's a nice little clip. So I encourage you to watch that. Now, I have a critique of this. He actually dismisses arguments that theists, or people who believe in God, give for answers to the problem of theological determinism. We're going to look at Tom Morris. He gives those answers. So namely, God could know the future just like a wizard, Dr. Strange, could with a crystal ball or the time infinity stone. But that doesn't mean the future is determined and free will is lost. Aristotle dealt with this problem and other ancients. So that's one bad thing. Dr. Strange didn't determine the future by looking into it. All right. I do like how he explains how quantum mechanics does not give us free will. Many philosophers don't get this. So this is a very popular misconception in the general public. So just because if you have quantum indeterminacy at that lower level, it doesn't mean it can bubble up and we have control. Okay, randomness doesn't give us the control we think we have in free will. Randomness just gives us seizures. So think about that. Bring it up on the discussion board if you're not quite sure what I'm saying there. But yeah, basically quantum mechanics would not give us control. And that's what I like about this little clip from the Waking Life video. Bring it up on the DB if you want. And someone post that film if this link's broken. All right, are we just puppets? So these issues have been raised by both atheists and theists. Are we puppets of God? So there's a theological objection to free will. Also, are we puppets of nature? And naturalistic or scientific atheist evolution. So this is the objection from scientific determinism. So I have very poor puppet things in there. You got God on the right side, and God and Charles Darwin next to him. To illustrate, we could be puppets of either. Or do we have free will? Or both. So let's look at some 3 objections to our common sense intuition that we do have free will. All right, so 2 objections to free will. These are out of Tom Morris's book. Theological fatalism, the theological challenge to free will. So this comes up. I like this. If you saw this Spielberg film, Colin Farrell and Tom Cruise have this little conversation where Colin Farrell brings it up. And he was actually a divinity student before he joined the FBI. And he went to seminary, rival to Talbot School of Theology out there in California. Fuller. All right, the movie Deja Vu, if you saw that, I usually used to play these clips in class and analyze it, but we're not going to do that. All right. For the discussion board, bring up any movie if you want to explain the scene or post a clip from YouTube and then talk about the relevance of it. But basically, what is this theological challenge to freedom? This is actually just the ancient Greek challenge of fatalism dressed up in theological clothing. So you don't need to believe in God to generate this problem. There has to be the possibility of foreknowledge about future events. So, come on, man. All right. I was going to say, in Infinity War, Doctor Strange. If you have a time stone and you can see possible futures, then this problem arises. You don't need to believe in a God. So Aristotle mentions it. This guy, I forget his name. What is his name? This guy. Crash Course Philosophy, that's it. So if you want to look up Crash Course Philosophy, Determinism, Free Will, I think that guy does a decent job of explaining some things on there. Also, Oedipus Rex. This issue came up with a prophecy, if you want to discuss that on the discussion board. So Martin Luther, we have Jonathan Edwards. We'll skip talking about that. All right. So if someone like the god Apollo or Doctor Strange knows that there will be a sea battle tomorrow, then it seems no matter what the generals and sailors decide, they're not free to choose not to fight in the sea battle. So the intuition is this. If God or Doctor Strange or the Scarlet Witch know you are going to ace this course, then there's nothing you can do to fail this course. You are not free. You do not have any choices. You are a puppet. Tom Morris says this, quote, divine foreknowledge would then seem to be a serious challenge to human freedom. Even human foreknowledge, if it is truly knowledge. If the future is somehow already metaphysically there to be known, it is set no matter what we think or try to do, and we have no freedom to make it otherwise. So if God or a seer with paranormal clairvoyance knows that Benedict Cumberbatch will cut the grass at noon on 5th of May, 2022, then it seems that he is not free to choose anything other than to cut the grass at that time, right? All right. Well, we're not so sure. People are going to disagree about this. Let's see what the problem is not. The problem will not arrive with merely knowledge of what is possible. So we have to make a distinction between seeing the actual future versus a possible future. So let's distinguish counterfactuals from actual foreknowledge of future events. Okay. Counterfactuals, subjunctive conditionals. So subjunctive mood, the verb is in the subjunctive mood when expressed a condition which is doubtful or not factual, conditional, and if-then statement. So, for example, if Justin Bieber were to place a dozen hot Krispy Kremes in front of Tuffer would eat all of them and fight the Beeb to get them. All right? So, yes, there's your humble instructor. And yes, I have a weakness with Krispy Kremes. I am incontinent with regards to those things. They melt in your mouth if you haven't tried one. So do you guys get it? Counterfactuals are possible futures. All right? So, if you've seen The Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, Lady and Galadriel, it's a possible future that Frodo sees. Also, the Final Destination movie, when they have a vision of what could happen, that's counterfactual. Same thing with, if you ever saw one of my favorite movies of all time, George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life. So here you have a story where George Bailey has an angel give him and show him a counterfactual, what could have happened if George Bailey wasn't born. If you saw the new Adam Sandler movie Click, it was kind of a same thing, a possible future. All right. And same thing if you ever saw the show Lost. Also, if you ever saw, Infinity War, Avengers, Doctor Strange looks at possible futures. Yeah, I do have it here. So Doctor Strange looks at counterfactuals. And he says, actually looks at 15 million different counterfactual futures in the movie. Sorry if that's a spoiler. He looks at the future. All right. So we're not in class, so if you want to talk about this on the discussion board and work on it, if Any way you think you can get out of this mess? What should the response be to the theological fatalists? Try this stuff out on your friends and family. See what they think. If God knows, or if Dr. Strange knows what they're going to do in 2 years, do they have any choices up to that point? All right. Fatalism, freedom. Let's read this quote by Zeno. Fate is the endless chain of causation whereby things are, the reason or formula by which the world goes on. Chrysippus said all things are produced by fate. Cleanthes, fate leads the willing, drags the unwilling. Freedom, men at some time are masters of their fates. Shakespeare. For man is man and master of his fate. So think about that. What do people mean by fate, fatalism? I'm fated to do this and that. Let's look at Karl Hofer's article in the SEP, which is the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy Online. They have a lot of great articles on there. So I use SEP and IEP, the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. They have professional philosophers write articles on there, so use that as a resource the rest of your life. Actually, if you want, pause this and read it. But fate's going to, basically what he's going to argue is this. Fatalism implies foreknowledge of the future by a god or a seer with supernatural foresight or some kind of teleology or goal-directedness. Like you were meant to be here, or God wanted you to be in this class, or Loki wanted you to eat that pizza last night, or Thor wanted you to become a pizza boy or girl, whatever. Determinism does not. So yeah. Post this on the discussion board if it's confusing and we can work it out. So determinism, you just have kind of the chain of events going where nobody has any choices, there's no free will. So it's not necessarily fatalism where there's some design to the universe where you're supposed to be in a certain place or everything happens for a reason. There has to be a God or law of karma for there to be, if things happen for a reason, or tiny gods. All right, the challenge from scientific determinism. So let's subtract God, say God doesn't exist, and let's also say that Dr. Strange and witches and do not exist as well for this. Again, he raises this problem in this Waking Life video that we mentioned earlier. So basically he's saying, yeah, if there are no souls and human beings are just made of atoms, what human beings are atoms moving in fields of force. Okay, what are atoms governed by? Laws of physics and chemistry. Even if there is radical indeterminism at the quantum level, it still doesn't give you control. What you think of when we praise or blame someone, or you praise or blame yourself, is that you had some control whether to eat that Krispy Kreme, or you have some control not to yell at or get irritable with the person at the library, excuse me, or what have you. All right. So robots and cosmic puppetry. The scientific, this is really a philosophical objection. It's not a scientific. But people like to slap the word scientific on things that are philosophical. The scientific challenge of freedom. So while many of the ancient Greeks were determinists and fatalists, the rise of the mechanical philosophy and the Enlightenment contributed greatly to seeing the world as a complex machine. So, quote on this view, we live and think in accordance with the same laws and causes that move all other physical components of the universal mechanism. So you have Laplace and other people where the rise of mechanistic theory 300 years ago, this happened. Let's look at our boy Al, Dr. Einstein. Everything is determined, the beginning as well as the end, by forces over which we have no control. It is determined for the insect as well as for the star, human beings, vegetables, or cosmic dust. We all dance to a mysterious tune, toned in the distance by an invisible player. So, What is this invisible player? This is chemistry and physics, the laws of nature. So if human beings are just parts of nature like rivers and lava flows and rain, then yes, we're all the same. Cosmic dust, lava, human beings. No choices, floating along. Now, I think there's some speculation that maybe Albert Einstein believed in Spinoza's God. I forget his theology. Maybe there is a God behind it all, but at least determinism is true. So on. All right, so here's the argument. The naturalistic worldview. So this is one of the most popular worldviews in the academy today. We could call this philosophical naturalism, scientific atheism, or scientific materialism. It goes by different names. So natural conditions outside our control cause inner bodily and brain states. Those cause mental and physical actions. All right? So you have an input, it goes through your brain, a black box, and then you have outputs. You say, ouch, or give me that Dr. Pepper, or come back here, you thief, or whatever. Quote, but if this is true, then you are ultimately a patient or conduit or pipeline for chains of natural causation that reach far back into the past before your birth and continue far forward into the future after your death. You are not an originating cause. In other words, an agent of anything. Nothing you ever do is due to your choices or thoughts alone. You are a puppet of nature. You are no more than a robot programmed by an unfeeling cosmos. End quote, Tom Morris, page 134. Okay? So if you've seen Stepford Wives, or I should have put Westworld on here. Yeah, I got a buddy who's in the new HBO Westworld series. He's the Asian scientist. Anyway, so in the Westworld or Stepford Wives, you're going to have robots, but they're never going to have free will. They're still always programmed. Okay, they're just things made of matter and nature. All right, let's look at this. So we're going to look at what an agent is and a patient is, because he used these language. So in metaphysics, an agent is something that originates change freely, a first mover. So Aristotle said, the rock is moved by the stick is moved by the hand, and the hand is moved by the man. And nothing moves the man. The man is an originator of motion. He's a first mover. Okay, so persons are seen as agents on dualistic metaphysics, where you believe in two things, body and soul. So in substance dualist worldviews, God, angels, demons, and human persons with souls are first movers. Why did the rock move? It's because that man moved it over there. That guy, Democritus. Does that make sense? All right. A patient is something that is incapable of acting freely and originating change. So dominoes, tables, carpets, volcanoes, planets, pencils, and all other inanimate objects conceivable are patients. So the ocean that Mayor West stabbed is just a patient. It's not an agent. The ocean wasn't trying to kill Peter Griffin. Or the lava that came out of the volcano and burned my house down and melted my Crown Vic, my 1991 Crown Vic, my Millennium Falcon. Lava is just a patient. My car is a patient. I'm the agent, if agents exist. So the problem with this naturalistic worldview is that there are no agents. Or agents, if human beings are just parts of nature. All right, so here's distinctions. Agents are first movers, the originators of events, sources of agent causation. Possible examples, God and gods, human persons, maybe some animals are persons, or agents with choices. Patients, they're not first movers or passive receivers. They will not move unless acted upon by antecedent agent causes or event causes. So examples, dominoes. You have lined up a bunch of dominoes. Each domino is explained by the other domino knocking them down, but ultimately explained by an agent who set them up and then flick the first domino over. All right. So, on philosophical naturalism or scientific atheism, at the macro level, physical events at time t1 cause physical events at times t2. So for billiards, the cue ball is in motion at t1, strikes the 8 ball at t2, and causes it to move. Or the brick flies through the air at time t1 and strikes the pane of glass at time t2. The event of the motion of the brick causes the event of glass breaking at t2. That's a Richard Swinburne example from The Existence of God. So mechanists believe only in event causation. There is no agent causation or causation by a free-willed person with the power to act independently of antecedently physical causes. Basically, this is because of Darwinian evolution. Souls cannot emerge, or non-physical souls or selves cannot come into existence if Darwin is right about how we got here. Darwin said basically just matter rearranges, and over time, we have all the species that exist today. So everything about human beings, if Darwin is right, can be explained by a movement of all the atoms, DNA. Okay? So souls with the supernatural power of free will cannot emerge on evolution. I gave a lecture I used to be part of this team of the neuroscientists at my church in Cincinnati. And this med student came in there, and she got angry at me. She just got hostile and just started yelling at me, saying I didn't know anything what I was talking about. And I tried to break it down like this. Look, we just have to back up. This is not me. I'm not saying what's true necessarily. This is what naturalists say. Will Provine, famous naturalist, all these other guys. Yeah, if Darwin is right about how we got here, matter rearranging, what's matter governed by? Chemistry and physics. There are no souls or free will. Humans are just parts of nature. And she just got hostile. And she's like, this guy should not ever speak. And I was like, okay. I should have just gave her an article. She didn't blame me. See, she blamed me. Anyway, so this is the challenge of scientific determinism. We're determined by laws of chemistry and physics to do everything that we do. Whereas human freedom on this picture doesn't exist. This is a quote, by the way. Where is human freedom on this picture? Doesn't exist. It's one of our chief illusions. The natural belief in free will is just a monstrous falsehood. But we should not feel bad about holding on to this illusion until science corrects us. We can't have helped it. Nota bene, take note, our whole mental lives are determined. So what we think and what we believe. So it'll become very difficult to blame humans for reasoning. This is going to be C.S. Lewis's argument for God's existence from reasoning. But think about this for a minute. My buddy, who's head of who's head of a couple philosophy departments, he said we were hanging out washing dishes a few years ago, and he's like, "Yeah, Tuffer, my illusion, my programming, evolutionary programming, and free will is so strong that I just go with it, even though I know, as a philosopher and a scientist, that it is impossible for me to have made any choice in my life, free choice in my life." He said, "But I don't care. Just the illusion is so strong, I'm going to go with it, and I'm going to blame people when they cut me off on the highway. I'm going to blame people that are mean. I'm going to get mad at others, even though, guess what? Getting mad at other human beings is just like getting mad at the rain, or getting mad at the lava flow, or getting mad at the ocean." And I said, okay, there you have it. Pierre Laplace. Okay, if physics became complete and we had enough knowledge to know where every atom in the universe was at a particular instant, we could predict the future. And we could discern the past. So, Laplace believed this. He's 18th, 19th century fella. But you see the view. Physics came complete. And we'd get a scan of you with a future MRI machine made by Tony Stark. And we know where every atom was, and we know your DNA. And we know we could calculate what's going to happen to you in 30 years. So, I think some movie I saw recently playing that. What was that movie? It was about information. Anyway. What movie was that? We're like, oh, we know enough about people already. Facebook, this. Oh, it was Captain America, the Winter Soldier. So if you saw Captain America, Winter Soldier, you had Hydra build these machines, and they had an algorithm by the evil Dr. Zorg or whatever from where he was able to calculate and know who would be villains in 30 years. So he predicted Doctor Strange would be a problem before he was Doctor Strange. If that makes sense. All right. What are your initial responses to the possibility that free will could be an illusion? Think about it. What do you make of this problem of natural agency? Problem of reconciling our ethical intuitions with naturalistic metaphysics? Let me add this before I forget. Well, bad guys mean good guys. All right, bring it up on the discussion board. Ask your friends about it. Try this. So get ready for the final midterm. Try this challenge of scientific determinism on your friends. See what they think. All right, let's look at Tom Morris's responses. 2 problems with the fatalism objection. There are 2 options. Open theists, if you're a Mormon, you believe in a small God, and, well, you're a polytheist, you believe in many gods, if you believe traditional Mormon theology, Joseph Smith. There's hundreds or millions or thousands of gods in the universe, and we have this inviolable free will. So, or you might believe that Clark Pinnock and Gregory Board are Orthodox Christians, they're not Mormons, but they still have this view of God. So God knows the future because God knows what he intends and his will cannot be thwarted. So God is working with free will creatures, but he's going to get his goals done no matter what because God's all powerful. God's a good guesser. God knows what nature is going to do. So he only has a few equations, these variables free will creatures run around to deal with. So basically, let's assume for these 2 Christians over here, so they believe, you know what, God has to get Jesus on that cross and crucified. Jesus has to die for the sins of humanity. Okay, so they don't know exactly how they're going to do it. The future is open for God, but he's going to get this done. So, do I explain this? Yeah, I'll go through this. Let me just finish explaining this real quick. So God can work around free will creatures to accomplish his goals. So he knows for sure a few things. He wants to get Jesus betrayed by someone. He needs to get the Reds to the 1990 World Series. He needs to get the Bengals to the Super Bowl in 2016. That didn't happen. That meant they should be 2018. And open theists think the future is open and not determined by God. There is no future yet for God to see. This is different from the view which we call the B series view of time of Augustine and Aquinas, where these guys thought that God created the universe every moment, past, present, and future, at one time it exists. And that's how God knows the future, because he can look and see creation. And there is no past, present, and future on the view of Augustine and Aquinas, if I'm getting it correctly. And that just everybody thinks they're in the present moment. But forget that. All right, basically, this is it. So open theists will say, So God can tell the prophets in the Bible, dude, write down that Jesus is going to get killed and this and this and this is going to happen. All right? So here's the prophecy. It's in the Bible 300 years before. Or, I'm sorry, I wasn't even reading the slide. God prophesied to the West in 400 BC is that, hey, my son will be betrayed by one of his disciples in 33 AD. So now God may have to go through 25 free-willed agents as disciples in order to find the person that will ultimately betray his or her son, Jesus. So say Judas is, in the last second, he's like, no, I'm not going to betray Jesus. So guess what? God is going to have to get Judas struck by lightning or catch leprosy and leave the 12 disciples. He's going to have to get another disciple in there who's going to betray Jesus. So God may have to use natural events to knock out Judas, Larry, Pete, Amy. Go through all these people on the way to finding someone who will finally betray Jesus and get him on that cross. Excuse me, does that make sense? If not, post on the discussion board. So, some open theologians say that God intends certain things in the future to happen and he will intervene to bring about states of affairs that he wants to come to pass. So he'll intervene here or there, but God generally knows what's going to happen. Some things have to happen, but God's open to what happens. Now, you saw some of this in the Final Destination trilogy. So what this guy did in the front, he saw, a counterfactual future. The plane's going to blow up and these people are going to die in this order. But in death, this thing, fate, still killed the same people in the same order, but just did it differently. So fate or death in Final Destination movies is like God if the open theists. These things are going to happen. These guys are going to die in this poster. Stifler was one of them. They're going to die in this order. But whether they do that, the original plan is up for grabs. All right, second issue. Second problem with the fatalism objection. Foreknowledge is not identical to predestination. So predestination is a causal notion. So if God predestines some event to occur, it happens because he predestines it. Now, foreknowledge is different. So if God foreknows something, it does not occur because he foreknows it. God foreknows it because it is going to happen. Thus, quote, foreknowledge can be knowledge of actions freely caused by someone other than God, namely by us. So, for some theists, God can look in the future and see, Mary is going to order a La Rosa's pizza at 8 p.m. on May 2nd, 2018. So God has known that for a million years or 2,000 years or whatever. All right. God didn't predestine that event. God just can look in the future and God can know, has foreknowledge of future events, and just knows what free will creatures are going to do. You see that? Predestination is that God caused that. Now, how these are related, if you're a Christian, there's different ways to work this out. I'll bring it up on the DB if you want. All right, so how does God know the future? There's two ways. Because God determined and causes the Reds to win the 1990 World Series. Or because God is simply all-knowing, omniscient, and can simply see into the future how free will creatures can act. So think about this. Augustine and Aquinas, they explained how God knew the future because God created every event and it was already in existence. So on that view of time, everybody's birth and death and then 2 million years in the future in heaven, God knows and can see and can predict because it already exists. Or some people, Molinus and others, Molina, they thought in modern day Molinus, God is simply all-knowing and can simply see in the future how free-willed creatures will act. It's mysterious and there's no explanation of it. We have no analog for human knowledge, but God's ways are different than our ways. So what do you think? This is kind of a pejorative term. Magically or supernaturally? How about, does God know the future? All right, think about it. Bring it up on the discussion board. All right. So, what do you guys think? I might ask this question and say, what is the best way for a theist, even if you're an atheist, just pretend you're a theist, and the Pope calls you up and say, hey, Larry, should I be an open theist, or should I make this distinction between predestination and foreknowledge? Give me the arguments for both. Tell me the best, most rational one in your view, and I'm going to go with that. So just, even if you're an atheist, say, well, yeah, look, if I believed in God, I would do this. I'd become an open theist. Or no, I wouldn't be an open theist. I just make this distinction between predestination and foreknowledge. Sound good? I should have asked you this on the discussion board, but bring it up anyway. All right. Martin Luther King Jr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. said this, quote, we are responsible human beings, not blind automatons, persons, not puppets. By endowing us with freedom, God relinquished a measure of his sovereignty and imposed certain limitations upon himself. That's very interesting. If you want to quote that on the discussion board, let's talk about it. Bring it up. So he's saying, and if you're writing a worldview paper, you could quote this and interact with it. To what degree do you agree or disagree with what Dr. Martin Luther King, Reverend King here? All right, St. Augustine said this. Now, against the sacrilegious and impious darings of reason, we assert both that God knows all things before they come to pass, and that we do by our free will whatsoever we know and feel to be done by us only because we will it. All right, bring Augustine's claim up if you want on your worldview paper or discussion board. All right. Okay, let's look at some problems with the objection from scientific determinism. Principle of universal causality, PUC, says this, quote, every event A has a cause, and B thereby stands in a causal chain with a very long history. So all of our choices are not real choices. They are the product of a chain of physical causes that stretches back to the beginning of the universe. The Big Bang, as the guy in the Waking Life video said. But wait a minute, why should we think this? What is the justification for this metaphysical what is this justification for the metaphysical position of physicalism? Okay. Is naturalistic naturalistic Darwinism known to be true? Sunday night there was a very interesting show. Shoot, what happened to me? David Berlinski and other people, they argue that we don't know Darwinism to be true. So if you're going to bet your whole life on this historical scientific theory and your view of free will on that, then he thinks they're misguided. Maybe Berlinski's wrong. You be the judge. It's Because this is a question. Why should I not trust what I seem to know about myself? That I'm a free-willed being with real choices. You be the judge, we will all disagree. Remember to use sharp minds and tender hearts for one another on the discussion board. So those are the examples. Libertarians will be like, I don't care what Darwin said. I know I have choices. I have real metaphysical, ontological choices in my life. I know President Trump has choices. So when he does something good, I'm going to praise him. When he does something bad, I'm going to blame him. So there are real choices there. And I'm aware of it. And whatever it takes to explain this, if I have to have a soul to explain how the power of free will, then so be it. All right? Or you can be like my friend who said, you know what? I am much more certain. I'd throw out all my personal experience. So he throws out his experience, which says he has choices. And he goes with Darwin and naturalistic Darwinism. Does that make a sense? So you pick what you know to be true. Trust your view that we have choices, and then they have a soul that explains that, or say, no, I'm going to throw out my personal experience and go with Darwinism. All right. Let's look at the three positions: libertarianism, determinism, compatibilism. So you have libertarianism, or you can call it incompatibilism, or you have determinism. Two forms of determinism: soft determinism, compatibilism, hard determinism, determinism. This should be a quiz question, but get clear on this. Libertarians and hard determinists agree on the same definition of freedom. All right? Compatibilists disagree. They're going to say, no, you guys are wrong. We're going to change the definition of freedom to make it compatible with determinism. So we're going to marry these two issues. Here's a chart. If you want to pause it and look at it. All right. So libertarianism, free will, simple indeterminism says this: free act that happens with a human being without a cause. They're uncaused free actions. Thus, the principle of universal causation is denied. Agency theory accepts PUC but also believes in agent causation. So both agent causation and event causation are allowed. Agents cause things by powers, capacities of intelligence, power of volition in the soul, non-physical powers. So yeah, for Aristotle and all these guys, a soul is a non-physical element about us with all these powers and capacities. If you remember from our study of Aristotle. All right? That makes sense? So libertarian agency theory. So determinism adopts the principle of universal causality, no agent causation, only event causation of the world. There I am with David Papineau, who was one of the top philosophical naturalists. His 1994 book, Philosophical Naturalism, is one of the best explanations of naturalism ever, especially even if you read the first page in the preface or introduction. Yes, the introduction is just fantastic statement of what naturalism is, if you want to get a grip on it. He's great, and Daniel Dennett are two of the best naturalists, I think. All right. Like we said, compatibilism redefines freedom in a way that the libertarian and determinist would not accept. So, on this view, quote, a free act is any event involving the body or mind of a person that is caused by an inner state of that person, such as a desire or intention or decision to act. So if the chain of events producing events in you runs through your mind, then we can say that particular act was free. I don't have the story of Dr. Delusion. But basically it is this. All right, so let's say everybody in the class, we're at McDonald's, and I have Tourette's, and I scream out profanities at everybody in front of me. Bleep, 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 bleep. All right. Most of you would say, oh, we're not going to blame him for that because He said bleepity bleep bleep bleep, and that was an involuntary reaction caused by this this condition that he has. Okay? But if somebody else in the class who doesn't have this issue, he says bleepity bleep bleep bleep, we might say, okay, even if we're determinists and we don't think he has a soul, so he doesn't have free will, but because the chain of events ran through his minds and he had the thought and belief, I'm going to cuss out this guy, then we can blame him in a way that you guys can't blame me for having Tourette's, for saying the exact same thing. Does that make sense? So there's certain cases where we'll blame a human if it runs through the right causal events in the head. We won't blame them. So let's pick two identical physical events. So let's say myself and my niece, we're sitting in front of a chicken, and I have a seizure and I punch that chicken. Now, my niece hates chickens and says, I'm going to kill you, chicken, and punches it the same way I did. Now, even though both of us didn't have a free choice, we blame my niece because she yelled, I hate chickens. And myself, I just had a seizure. So exact same body movement, but because it ran through the right chain of events in the head, then we say one of us is free and one is not. Okay? All right. This was a clip that came out Saturday Night Live, but they actually, the guy studied some philosophy. He brought up this issue. So Maraca, making fun of Dora the Explorer, actually saves Mittens. And she asked the question, if I save Mittens, can I be praised for this event when everything that I did was caused by my beliefs and desires that are outside of my control? So basically, she was giving a critique of compatibilism, where, yeah, how do we say she's free? She's just a meat robot, just like lava and rain and in the ocean. All right. Dr. Delusion, I'll have to scan that, actually, get that up for you guys. But the question is going to be, if you have a mad scientist and he puts electrode in Jones' brain, and he's now the Manchurian candidate, and Gene Wilder can use his computer and program him to do whatever, just like Weapon X did in the movie The Wolverine. So yeah, is he free? Is Weapon X free if he's being commanded by the mad scientist Stryker, who's typing in these commands into the computer, telling him to do what he's doing? All right, here's a Jedi counterexample to compatibilism. So in all these cases, the person is mind tricked by the Jedi, but this person is still free in the compatibilist sense. Why would it be the case? So think about, if you want to bring this up in the discussion board, try to explain. I'm not going to tell you what it is, or what is the Jedi counterexample to compatibilism? Given the compatibilist view that we should hold someone accountable if they say things and do things, like my niece punching the chicken should be held accountable, or somebody in the class cussing out somebody at McDonald's. We hold them incompatible. All right. Basically, Dr. Delusion story. This is the same example, Jedi counterexamples, as, let me just write this down. Okay, let's look at some arguments for or against. All right. Problems with the simple indeterminism. It seems extreme to deny the principle of universal causation. So the definition of free action is inadequate. So random events, a seizure causing me to knock over a cup of coffee, or a seizure causing me to, a person with Tourette's syndrome, to cuss somebody out. That's a free action on the view of libertarianism. But since there's a fluke occurrences, they do not seem like they are under the control of an agent. It doesn't seem like these are free. So if you watch the Waking Life clip, this guy would rather be a gear in a huge Newtonian machine than an indeterministic entity. In the literature, there's an example of the spy trying to alert a comrade, knocking over the coffee. We're not going to read that. Okay, so forget that version of libertarianism. Problems with the agency theory. This is my view, agency theory, if anybody cares. So critique it, and I'll try to defend it on the discussion board if you want to interact with me on that. The problem with agency theory, this involves the bloated ontology. So this is a bloated ontology objection. This requires a weird ontology to work. You have to believe that humans have souls and minds, non-physical souls and minds. And this is just bizarre. Let's just get rid of souls and minds and just say every human is a part of nature, like rivers and lava and so on. Okay? And there's the objection from naturalistic, atheistic evolution, Darwinism. Naturalistic evolution cannot, in principle, explain the existence of substances or souls with its power to exert free will. Okay? So these are the two major arguments against libertarian agency theory. And let's explain this objection from Darwinism below. All right, it's not just enough to tell some kind of a just so story that some organisms mutated and had free will, and that natural selection operated on this new emergent trait. By the way, just so story, I don't know if you guys read Richard Kipling, How the Leopard Got His Spots. Anyway, all right, so it's not enough to tell that some kind of a just so story that some organism mutated and had free will. So evolutionary psychologists will do this. Oh, of course, for the power of free will, gave people some kind of an evolutionary advantage. And those with free will lived, and those without free will died out. Developmental biologists will scream, no, 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 you can't just say this just so story. You have to explain how this power or this phenotypic trait came about by twiddling with the genome. All right? You have to explain how this genetic mutation created this power. In other words, what is needed is an explanation of how powers emerge in organisms that cannot be subsumed under any natural law, chemical, physical, or neurobiological. So yeah, if libertarian agency theory is real, when an agent makes a free choice, she introduces new energy into the world and breaks the laws of physics. So yeah, if free will, libertarian agency is true, human beings are supernatural beings with supernatural powers. Okay? Quickly, this is probably too much explanation. Genotype, the genetic information in the organism, produces a phenotype. Phenotype is the manifest trait in the organism. If the pea is wrinkled, the wrinkled skin is the phenotypic trait. Smoothness of the pea is also phenotypic. So phenotypic traits are caused by genotypic traits. So if humans have free will, this power is going to be genetic power. But yeah, you just can't tell this just so story, this adaptation of story, why natural selection saved that trait. You need a developmental story as well. Also, to prove a trait was an adaptation, a trait produced by natural selection versus some other evolutionary process, you need a lot more than a just so story. So yeah, as I mentioned, this is one major problem with evolutionary psychology. It's a lot of it's just so stories. Oh yeah. If people didn't believe this, they wouldn't have survived. Okay, wait a minute. Pain is also an interesting case as well. All right. So yeah, the power of free will is supernatural if it exists. Power of free will, if it is real, is as bizarre as emergent powers that are possessed by some of the X-Men characters. So yes, Scarlet Witch in Avengers Infinity War. And you have Old Storm and Iceman on the right. Logan's power isn't really breaking the laws of physics, healing. So forget him. Well, actually, I don't know. I don't know what his healing is based on. So maybe it is a supernatural break of the physics. You guys don't know Heroes. This was from 2002 or something. But they're mutants with physical powers. There's J.J. Abrams' buddy. He was in a couple of Star Wars movies. There's Sylvester Stallone's son up there. He's also in This Is Us show. Bottom right corner. This guy. All right. Or Marvel Cinematic Universe or the DCU. You have Thor. He's the god of thunder. He's got all kinds of supernatural powers. Vision does too. He breaks the laws of physics, flies around. Ego. Green Lantern. Flash. These guys have supernatural powers. All right. Problems with compatibilism are these. Our intuitions about freedom are libertarian in nature. Libertarian agency theory. They're not compatibilist. So this freedom of compatibilism is not real freedom. The choices are not real. So this is why hard determinists and libertarians are going to say compatibilists, you can't just redefine freedom. That's not what we mean by freedom. We mean a real choice, A or B, that's not determined by any antecedent events. Okay? That was one of my favorite vacations, Philippines. All right, more problems with compatibilism. Remember the examples to show that our intuitions are libertarian in nature and the compatibilist freedom is not real freedom. So Dr. Delusion's patients are free. Or Manchurian candidate is free. Or Weapon X is free. Makes sense. So these people beliefs are controlled by someone else. On compatibilism, they are free. So yeah, that doesn't make much sense. Same thing, the Jedi manipulated persons are free. All right. There you have it. Post this on the discussion board if this doesn't make any sense. Problems with hard determinism. It goes against our intuitions about ourselves. It makes a mockery of morality and ethics. It makes a mockery of reason. All of our beliefs are determined. We never use true reason. Every belief is determined. So think about this. I think we looked about this last week when we did arguments for substance dualism. One of the arguments for substance dualism is this argument from reason that was first, well, it's mentioned by Kant, but also developed by C.S. Lewis in his book Miracles, also developed by Victor Reppert's book, C.S. Lewis's Dangerous Idea. Where is that? Oh, I developed these. Let's look at these three things real quick. So what's the problem with hard determinism or either form of determinism? Our intuitions about ourselves. Here's some rhetorical questions. I shouldn't have done this. Doesn't it seem like we are free? And doesn't it seem like we should hold people morally responsible? Even if we can tell some psychological deterministic story in some cases, at least some of the time we have control over actions, right? So think about it. You might conclude you don't. So yeah, my buddy dismisses the intuition, thinks mindless evolutionary process for his illusions. Oh, he just thanks him. All right? But this doesn't seem to be, so this is where you weigh it out. Are you more sure of atheistic Darwinism is true, or are you more sure that you have a free will choice, at least one in your life? If you just had one choice in your life, that is sufficient for libertarian agency. People miss that. Also, second problem with determinism, it makes a mockery of morality and ethics. Think about it. Our view of the penal system must change. Retributive justice, where we punish people, makes no sense. Now, it might make sense to jail somebody because they're going to get out and hurt somebody else, but punishing people makes absolutely zero sense. Okay? Unless you're doing this to shape them into people that, forget that. Punishment doesn't make any sense. You might do things, you might justify jailing people to protect other people, or jail or electroshock or something might make people into better people that don't commit crimes. Anyway. So yeah, rehabilitation, restorative justice, or transformative justice is the only thing that fits with determinism. And our ethical beliefs were also forced upon us by our genetic makeup and environmental influences. By the way, this has been a trend. The last 100 years. To erase more and more of human freedom. So think about that. So we don't blame people anymore. Oh, it was their childhood. And so this has been a huge question. A lot of these judges are letting people out of prison in light sentences. Go to rehab, you'll be fine. But wait a minute. They end up committing the same crime. What was that little girl who was killed by a repeat sex offender in Florida? They had a law because of her where it's got to be a minimum of 15 years to keep people off the street. And so you see this. A lot of people believe in less and less free will, and it's playing out in the court systems and how sentencing. Think about it. All right, third, this is the third complaint about determinism. Determinism makes a mockery of reason. So free will is required for reason to occur. Also, non-physical normative principles like the laws of logic, mathematics, and non-causal relations in epistemology, like a basing relation. These must exist, and human thought must be able to be related in this manner. So physicalism would preclude reason. Physicalism would eliminate philosophy. So in fact, determinism, physicalism, and scientific determinism, if true, were beliefs forced upon us by DNA and nature. So if we cannot use our free power of the mind to reason, since it doesn't exist, to know if things are true or not. They might be true, but if they are, we cannot make the claim that they are reasonable to believe, because reason is eliminated. If they are true, reason is impossible. Okay, does that make sense? What C.S. Lewis, Kant, Victor Reppert, and these arguments from Reason guys are trying to say is, physicalism might be true, determinism and Darwinism might be true, but we can't use reason to believe it, because reason doesn't exist if these things are true. So, naturalistic evolution pulls the rug out from underneath science itself. It is irrational. Science is not a rational truth-gathering discipline anymore, because science needs reason, philosophy, truth to work. But if we're just brains and we don't have free will, all our beliefs are determined, then we're stuck believing it. All right? I think, did I explain this? Because this was Darwin's worry. This was Darwin's doubt. Shoot, I forget the guy's name. He wrote a book called Darwin's Doubt. But basically, Darwin said, why should I trust a theory that came out of a monkey's brain? He's talking about himself. So yeah, why should we trust any scientific theory that came out of the mud? All right? Democritus was one of the first evolutionists, and he's like, yeah, human beings crawled forth from the slime. So Aristotle might ask, listen, Democritus, why should I believe what that slime believes? That's just slime manipulated by chemistry and physics. All right. Yeah, check out these two books if you want to read more of the argument from reason against naturalism, atheism, and argument that for God's existence. So think about this. What do you know to be true? When you're writing your worldview papers, what in the world do you know to be true? So if you start with materialistic physicalist assumptions, atheism and naturalistic evolution, you will dismiss your intuitions about free will as illusions. That's what my buddy does. That's his right. Hey, that's where he is. But if you assume your phenomenological experience tells you something about yourself that you are free, then you'll be tempted to reject materialism and adopt a substance dualist view of the self. So, if we truly have libertarian agency, and if we are immaterial substances with the power to break the laws of physics, naturalistic evolution is not the complete story of humans came to be. By the way, the book on this, J.P. Moreland, look his book, what's it called? The Failure of Naturalism. He says this is his thesis. If this claim in Genesis 1, 26-27 is true, that human beings are made in God's image, then there should be things about human beings that cannot be explained by the hard sciences. We should be different than nature. And J.P. Moreland argues that the power of reason, the soul, free will, these arguments for substance dualism show that human beings are not natural things like rain and lava, but that we are actually supernatural beings made in God's image with non-physical souls, as Socrates and Plato and Aristotle believed. All right, bring that up in the DB if you want. So you be the judge. Think about these dilemmas here for a minute. Which do you think has the greater evidence? Physicalism is the view that only matter and energy exists, so no souls, no gods, things like that. All right, conclusion. We're almost done. Metaphysical apparatus necessary to support the agency theory version of libertarian agency. When you want to believe in something, you also have to believe in everything that's necessary for believing in it. All right? So guess what? J.P. Moreland thinks that, hey, free will is evidence that we have a soul, a non-physical soul. So I know I've made at least one choice in my life, therefore I at least have to have a soul. Okay? So let's review substance dualism real quick. So most people agree that substance dualism, and not just property dualism, is required in order to maintain a coherent belief in libertarian agency. So you remember that property dualists, you don't believe in an I or a self or a center of powers. You just believe in mental properties and physical brain properties. Okay? So yeah, quick review here. Materialism or physicalism, the belief that we are made up of our brains only. Property dualism, there are non-physical properties, beliefs, desires, sensations, willings, thoughts that are over and above our physical brain properties. Substance dualism, there is a non-physical substance or soul which happens to be a center of powers, capacities. In other words, self or I is real. So, property dualist, alrighty? That makes sense? Quick review of those. If not, ask me on the DB or email me. All right. Let's read this argument. Premise 1. If we are simply made of atoms, atoms are things governed by natural laws. Atoms cannot choose to do anything other than obey the laws of physics. The laws of physics determine the behavior of atoms. Premise 2. So something needs to be over and above the laws of physics and chemistry. There has to be some substance or soul or self that is not determined by the laws of physics and chemistry. Also, the substance has to persist through time. Non-substance views of persons like the bundle theory of Hume and the property dualist theory of the Buddha cannot account for this. There has to be something exerted active power in controlling basic events over a period of time. This is what we call an immaterial substance or soul. Property dualism is not enough. I just mentioned this. Property dualism does not give you the metaphysical apparatus to support libertarian agency. So what is required is a substantial self that persists through time with the power to control basic events for a non-basic end. Bundle theorists like Hume and the Buddha are stuck with event causation. Property dualism will not give you the active power in Thomas Reid's sense. And William Rowe adopts Thomas Reid's view. You guys got to read William Rowe's. I used William Rowe's book, Philosophy of Religion, for years. He is an atheist emeritus at Purdue University, but his book on free will is fantastic. So I would check out William Rowe's book on free will. And interesting, William Rowe, J.P. Moreland actually asked him one time, like, because he's a naturalist, but he believes in free will. And William Rowe just says, I don't know how to explain it. So he kind of eats it. So that's actually another way you can go. You can just say, I believe in both, and I eat them both. All right. So again, the issue is control. This came out in the Waking Life snippet, but many people try to argue from indeterminacy at the quantum level to freedom at the macro level. That gives you maybe libertarian agency indeterminacy, but that's not agency theory or control. So as John Bishop, as a naturalist, argued in his book, Natural Agency, both indeterminacy and determinacy will give some of the problem of natural agency. The issue is whether or not people are controlled. All right, what do you guys think? And this is amazing. If the libertarian argument is correct, then people on the street can know that Darwin was wrong. So you and your grandma and your niece and nephew can know enough about yourselves to know that you're not something that could possibly have been produced by naturalistic evolution. Okay? Think about that. That is very exciting if that is true. All right? We can know that this theory that dominates the whole world has serious problems. All right? Now, yes, the philosopher can pull rank on the biologist. You know, there's a good video from the Examined Life. I used to steal it on YouTube. It's gone. So forget this. I got the hard copy. But Daniel Dennett, naturalist, he cheats too in that. We can't help but use free will language or substance dualist language. That's another problem. If you want to bring up one of these issues on the discussion board, do it. So why does Marvel Comics give the bad guys excuses? Now, Thanos is a little bit different, and so I stand corrected. Thanos is a bad guy in the Infinity War. They develop his character a lot. But Green Goblin, he was just a good guy who got some green serum. Doc Ock was controlled by AI. So these guys weren't really bad. Topher Grace became Venom. He's not really a bad guy. So what do you think about this? Are people just programmed to be good or bad? Are we not to be praised and blamed for our thoughts or actions? What do you think? And DC Comics, how different is the Joker? love this, The Dark Knight Rises. I'm sorry, The Dark Knight. That movie was fantastic. And Heath Ledger, right there. I mean, as Alfred said it, some people just like to watch the Will burn. Bring that up if you want in the discussion board. He's just bad and likes it. And if we want to bring up the Tom Cruise Minority Report, you can watch this clip on YouTube, look it up. Analyze that conversation. So the paradox, and you can, now you know enough if you watch this, you can deal with Colin Farrell's point he raises to Tom Cruise. Oh, this is interesting too. iRobot. iRobot Westworld pull this stuff. So we need to really ask some questions. If that's possible. Because they're going to be a physical thing. Same thing in Westworld on HBO. Oh, Sliding Doors and Infinity War. If you want to bring up, this is a great counterfactual movie. And if you want to bring up Avengers, do that. Here's some notes, some stuff if you want to look it up. Or email me anytime. By the way, Evolution of the Soul, Richard Swinburne down here. He gives arguments for the existence of the self and free will. Is there a God? I need to add J.P. Moreland's Is There a Soul? He makes it's much more digestible arguments for the mind and soul. And as far as compatibilism goes, Daniel Dennett, Elbow Room, he's the best compatibilist, one of them. So look him up, Daniel Dennett, on these issues. Sound good? I think that's it. Also, online resources. There I am with my godchild a few years ago when I was living in France. So SEP, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Stanford. Look up these guys. All right. Sound good? Guess there's more here. All right. I'll see you guys. Email me comments. Hope the volume's okay on this one. All righty.